JT Olson is an overcomer. After being orphaned as a child alongside his 4 siblings, he later founded Both Hands, a faith-based nonprofit serving orphans, widows, and adoptive families. Welcome to the Harvest Show.
Thank you very much, Valerie.
I mean, you have an incredible story. As I was reading part of your book last night and during the week, I was like, wow, how does anyone survive that? It was so tragic for you as a young child. Kind of take us back to what happened that day when the person came to your house and told you about your parents.
Well, I was 12 years old. It was 1969, and I was in 7th grade. And me and my 4 of the siblings lived on a farm in northeastern Iowa, and one weekend my mom and dad said they were going to go away for the weekend and celebrate their 16th wedding anniversary. And we were farmed out to different places, and I know that Saturday I'd spent the whole day in my friend's barn, so I was pretty dirty. When we were being brought home because Mom and Dad were coming home, and I went down the basement to take my boots off, and my older brother, I remember bending over, unlacing my boots, and my older brother came down the stairs, and I looked up at him, and I was excited. I said, "Are Mom and Dad home?" And he looked at me, and he said, "Mom and Dad are dead."
Wow.
Yeah. And I said, "What?" He said, "Mom and Dad are dead. They were killed in a car accident an hour ago." And he walked upstairs. And I remember hitting the floor, and I remember crying and wailing like any 12-year-old would, because it's just, that's an earth-shattering experience.
And you said that at that moment you realized you didn't know to call it orphan, but you realized you were an orphan.
Yeah, I never really thought about it in those terms. All I thought about, I remember very clearly thinking, what's going to happen to us? Who's going to take care of us? You know, I didn't know.
And what happened to you?
Well, I mean, 3 months before the accident, my mom and dad changed their will. That if anything would happen to them, my aunt and uncle, who lived in a nice suburb of Milwaukee, would take us, and vice versa if anything would happen to them. They already had 3 kids of their own. They took all 5 of us in. So I know what it's like to be rescued. I know I'm a very fortunate person because we didn't get broken up. The 5 of us stayed together, and I think that was key, and that's what my mom and dad wanted.
But it doesn't end like that for a lot of children around the country and throughout the world. They end up becoming orphans. Fast forward several decades, and you founded Both Hands. Tell us about that organization.
Well, I was on the board of Bethany Christian Services. I was doing a local fundraiser, you know, and I was doing a golf fundraiser. And I love telling this story because it's a God story. You know, I mailed my letters out like I was supposed to and asked someone would you sponsor me while I golf. Well, I had a guy who I'm in a Bible study with. He sends my letter back to me, and he doesn't send me a check. Instead, he just scribbles on my letter. He says, "JT, if you told me you were working on a widow's house, I might sponsor you. But you're just golfing. Nice cause, but not my money."
Wow. Wow.
Well, and it hurt my feelings a little bit, but at the same time, I thought, that's really a good idea, you know, and it wasn't until about 2 or 3 years later, I'm in church running into a friend of mine. Hadn't seen him in a couple months, so I didn't know what was happening. I said, "Hey, what's up?" He said, "I'm adopting 4 kids from Moldova." And I said, "What happened?" He said, "Well, I went over there, fell in love with this one little child, started the adoption process, and he found out he's got 3 siblings. And Don looked at me and says, "And we're not going to break the siblings up." Well, I'm the just right guy to say that too.
Right, right, I mean, because of your background.
I mean, I'm not going to sit there and say, "Are you sure?" I was the guy sitting there saying, "Yeah." And I remember very clearly looking at him and thinking in my head, here's a man who has a faith that I covet. I want to have a faith like that. And I looked at Don, because I'd already adopted by that point. I said, "Don, how much is this going to cost?" He said, "About $65,000. I said, "You have any idea how you're going to raise that money?" And he said, "No." And I said, "I think I got an idea." So long story short, we got about 13, 14 guys. We all mailed letters out to everyone we knew saying, "Would you sponsor me while I work on this widow's house? All the money is going to go towards the cost of bringing these 4 kids home from Moldova." And we spent the day working on our house. We didn't, everyone got supplies donated. I mean, people donated supplies. We didn't spend any money.
But you were a successful businessman at this point in your life? What was, I mean, because didn't you give up your lifestyle, I mean, your business to do this? I mean,
Yeah.
you have this saying, why not use a life savings to save a life? What exactly does that mean? Give up all of your money, right?
Yeah, well, what that means, that hit me because before we adopted, my biggest objection to adoption was the cost. And we had just started this business, and I didn't want to spend all our money on this. We weren't even taking a salary yet, and my wife said we should adopt. I'm saying we can't adopt. I said, if we adopt, we're have to go into our life savings. Do you want to use our life savings? And it was one Christmas Eve, 2001. I'm up in the attic trying to find the stockings to hang by the chimney with care. And I look around at the strollers and the car seats and the cribs, and that's when it hits me. What's wrong with using a life savings to save a life?
Because you had 4 biological children,
yeah.
right? And then you adopted your daughter, Grace?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
okay. And so tell me about The Orphan, the Widow, and Me.
Well, that's, whenever I tell the story about both hands, about my mom and dad, about that first project, because that first project, when we did it, we raised over $55,000. I mean, it was amazing what we did. And whenever I tell the story of how that all happens and then all this project since then, someone always comes up to me afterwards and says, you should write a book. so we finally did. But it's all about my story, about my mom and dad, about growing up and some of the trials and tribulations of,
Of going through what you went through.
Yeah.
Because I would imagine that you want children and widows and other families to have a positive experience. Like I'd imagine your experience was positive. I mean, your aunt and uncle took you in,
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah.
Talk about the project. So to date, according to your information, 655 projects in 42 states and counting. So what types of other projects and programs are we talking about?
Well, when a project is when a family a family comes to us and they get approved, they fill out the application and everything, and then I start working with them. So that's a project. And what the family does is they recruit their friends, maybe 10, 15, 20 of their friends, and they and their friends all send a letter out to anyone they can think of, would you sponsor me while I work on this widow's house? And I coach a family through the projects. And here's how you find a widow, here's how you get your team, here's the letters you used to send out. We've got everything they need to do a project.
When I was thinking about your book and what you do, I thought of Psalm 68:5, where the Bible says God will be a father to the fatherless and a defender of the widow is God in his holy habitation. And as a single mom, I somehow thought that had some deep spiritual revelation that God would somehow reach down and do it. He doesn't. He uses people.
He uses people.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's awesome because we've done 655 projects in 42 states. 788 kids are no longer orphans, and 724 widows have been blessed.
Wow.
And we've raised $7.6 million for families to use. And I should say this. We don't take anything out for our operations.
Yeah, I see here that 100% of the funds raised through both hands they go to adoptive families and other orphan causes.
Yeah. We raise our own operations on the side.
So for the person who's watching and saying, I can't afford to adopt a child, I can't afford to do this, and I can't go to another country to help orphans and widows, what do you say to them? Where can they start?
They can start, by looking up an adoption agency, going to foster care. There's a lot of places you can make a difference. If you don't feel like you can take on a child, there's a lot of things you can do for the foster care system in every state. And if their only objection to not adopting is the money, we can help them with that. Because families do both hands projects and they raise anywhere from $5,000 to $30,000.
So you sponsor families in the United States and families abroad in other countries? I mean, you
Yes.
bring in other children from other countries.
Right, and keep in mind, we're not an adoption agency. I just
Right.
help families raise money. But yes, we work with families who are doing international, and we work with them who are doing domestic.
Well, JT, before I let you go, what's the takeaway of The Orphan, the Widow, and Me? When a person reads it, what do you want them to learn?
I want them to be inspired. I want them to be inspired. I want them to use the story that's their story, because somewhere along the line, God has created them for something very unique. And I hope they read the book, and I hope they get inspired.
Well, I'll say amen to that. To connect with JT, go to bothhands.org or go to harvest-tv.com for a link to his new project. It's called The Orphan, the Widow, and Me. Coming up next, Pastor Mark Lance with today's Motivational Minute. We'll be right back.